You know, I had an interesting experience at Divine Liturgy Sunday. And it was interesting because it was like there was a paradoxical aspect to it. So I usually sit up in the front about three rows down, three pews down. Yes, we have pews. I go to one of them. I go to one of them parishes. Anyway, about midway through the Divine Liturgy, I noticed there were two young men, probably 20s, early 20s. One was shorter, disheveled, black hair, big glasses, looked sort of nerdy, almost like dyed black hair. They both look like they crawled right out of bed. And the other was a taller black dude, little fro, sweatpants, also disheveled. I don't know what bedhead looks like for black people, but maybe they both had bedhead. And anyway, I knew they were out of place right away. I knew it was strange to look at them and consider them to be like new inquirers because they were sitting in the first row. They also had Bibles in their hands, which is not something you're going to see in an Orthodox church during Divine Liturgy. So right away I was like, something off he. And then I was thinking, are these people here to disrupt? I thought that in my mind. I actually thought that in my head. I was like, they're sitting up close. They're not, it doesn't look like they're inquirers, but maybe I'm wrong. But I had the thought of disruption. I had a thought that they're there to disrupt or do something, undermine something. I had that intuition. And I put it to the side, because thinking like that gets you away from the focus of the Divine Liturgy. And about halfway through, there was a moment in between the statements of the priest facilitating the liturgy. Out of nowhere, the black dude, and we're talking up front, first row, very first, closest to the priest, he screams in the silence of the parish, "I have a message from God!" Just like that, loud. And my priest turns around, looks right where he is, he actually still didn't know who said it. He just looked in the direction and sort of looked to the back of the parish. And immediately the men in the parish, and there's a lot of us, all of us started to restructure a little bit our stances and where we were positioned. And the ushers, one of them being I think an active police officer, comes right up next to them and just stands, just waiting. Give him 1 strike chance, 2 strike chance at least. The one guy in the black hair, disheveled hair with the glasses, shorter guy, starts kind of smiling. He's smirking. Oh, dude, the rage I had. The rage. Started smirking. He was obviously knew what the guy was up to, in support of it, and almost like I couldn't tell if it was a troll. Now, obviously, the first thing you think, especially given the temperature of politics and religion and all the rest today, you think those are the last words you hear before an explosion. I've got a message from God. Now, he never said what a message, because the guy standing right in front of me immediately put his hand on the shoulder of the black dude and silenced him. Just from that, just one touch on the shoulder silenced him. So they were doing some demonic stuff. I couldn't tell if they were on some sort of drugs. I didn't know if they took mushrooms and decided to just go to church. But the weird thing is they both had Bibles. The one had a red letter Bible. The words of Christ are in red. He opened it up nervously after his friend announced he has a message from God. The whole parish shifted. The whole entire thing got defensive a little bit, necessarily so. And we waited and predictably what happened is the guy, same black dude, screamed something else. I don't know if he said something like, "Don't turn your cheek to me," or something. I thought he said something about sheep. Megan and I, our family was close, so we were extra nervous because, when you get someone who's clearly has bad intent, having the nerve and the balls to scream out, "I have a message from God," in the middle of a divine liturgy of 300 people. They're clearly willing to do other things. So I thought, well, it's possible. It's possible he's closest to the priest. He might actually try something. So the beauty of it was that all of the men, we all literally positioned ourselves. You saw a physical shift in the room. People got closer to him. We were ready. I was ready, dude. I was ready. Anyway, so it was still confusing. And then, then he said his second statement, whatever it was. It was garbled. It was hard to tell what it was. One of the ushers directly faces him, walks over to him, directly faces him, puts his hand on his arm, said something. I couldn't make out what he said, but clearly it was deliberate and effective because both of the demons packed up their stuff and were ushered out with the assurance of our security guards. And I was happy to see that, but it was interesting. It altered the rest of the divine liturgy for sure. The energy of the room was shifted, and it wasn't a terrible shift. Maybe it was maybe something got heavier. Maybe it was heavier. Even the homily, the sermon delivered by my priest, was a little bit charged, a little bit heavier. But it was interesting because a portion of the sermon was dedicated toward meeting people where they are. And I thought to my head, even though it was a beautiful sermon and true in so many ways, I couldn't help but think, how do you meet the devil where he is? Meet people where they are. Not saying that people can be the devil, but the sentiment must have some sort of constraint. For instance, we didn't meet those people where they are, those two goblins. We heard what they said, and we knew what they were there for, and we extinguished it immediately, which I thought was beautiful. And I thought, well, it's weird that we think that way about our church. Not weird. I think it's accurate. But what the weird part is we don't extend that into society. Now, maybe there's a distinction I need to learn in my practice, but my inquiry here, and something I will probably talk to my priest about, is that we're so justified in removing those people physically, if needed, from the parish in the instance of disrupting our conversation with God. Right? Makes sense. But once they're outside the world, but the world becomes a safe zone for them. Why? Why do we meet all these people where they are out in the world if the world itself, we're in the process of consecrating all of these spaces? That ideally, not that we could ever reach it, not that it's the only goal, but ideally that we make the world Orthodox. It's not just the people becoming Orthodox would reflect in the world, how things look, how buildings are shaped, what towns look like, how they operate. Yes, this is a big goal. This is a big 500-year perhaps goal, okay? But the thing is, how do you meet a demon where he's at? How do you meet someone where they're at if where they're at justifies the physical removal of where they're at? You know what I mean? Like, does it count? Is physically removing people from, public or inside the parish building, are we still meeting them where they're at by physically remove? Like, we're acknowledging where they're at. You're here to disrupt. You're here to act against God. We're here to remove you. Now, but that's what bothers me, is that when I go outside in the world is completely dominated by the same demonic behavior, the same rejection, the same, disrespect, the same liberty, unbridled liberty. And we're like, oh, well, no, the world's not, that doesn't count. We got to let these guys, we got to let them do pride parades in the public square. We have to let the Muslims worship in public with loudspeakers. It's part of our, I recently saw a post from Jacob Hansen, who's the Muslim. He's like, I always confuse Muslims and Mormons because their theology is the same. Mormon, he's like that, a Mormon apologist. And he responded to a news article that said, like, in, I forget which European country, they're going to make it prohibit Muslims from wearing covering their faces or whatever in public or whatever. And he was like, this is not an expression of Christianity. And you're like, what? First of all, Mormonism isn't Christian. But even if it were granted and smuggled in the umbrella, the folder of Christianity, it's like, how is it that Christianity supports above and beyond anything else, the liberty to express yourself in any given way? Well, no, of course not. Like, for instance, a really good counterexample to this is, if you're going to hold the position that being Christian allows others to express their religion, you're going to have to then be okay with people who express public nudity, as all they need to do is tie it to their religion, and you're all good with it, right? Public indecency. What if their religion is all about sexual liberation? What if that's their religion? How are you going to say it's anti-Christian to stop men from running around in public places with boners? Oh, it's part of their religion. No. This is where I'm like, yeah, meet them where they're at, but there's going to be a line of where people are at, and you can't understand them more. I'm just here to understand you. No. I'm not going to sit and try to understand why the reasoning or the lack thereof of some pervert justifying his public indecency. I don't care what he thinks. I don't care where he's at. Obviously, I know where he's at. He's in a dark place. That's why what confuses me, and I would need some guidance, and I'll seek the guidance, but the thing is that really irks me is this notion of meeting people where they're at is the only way to go. How do you meet a pervert where they're at? Why am I going to meet perverts where they're at? I don't want to meet them in the darkness. Oh, I really understand where you're at. I mean, yeah, I really get that. Oh, I really get that. And there's an increase of public indecency, by the way, following this notion that you just, it's not liberating to stop them. And all the libertarians that we've debated in the last 5 years, ramping up to this reality, and by the way, public nudity or going into a church and screaming, I have a message from God to disrupt the service, to me, they're different, but they're equal in their indecency to me. Like, they're different levels of indecency, but they're still there. It's still this notion of complete disregard. And then the question comes, well, whose view gets to disregard the others? Well, if you're a Christian, what other view could you take than you have the view that determines which other views get discarded? How could you take up any other pluralistic approach on this? You can't. That's the weakening of the West is that alone. That right there rests on that. Is that, well, we have to get along and live in a plural society. That's the way it is. No. Because you're going to have to find a line where that ends. And public indecency, or people coming into your parish and screaming demonic things, they're disrupting something that's ordered. Society is ordered. You know, I'm back into, I'm doing all of the catechism courses all over again, just because I want to. And the first, obviously, for the most part, is probably the same for every parish, but you kind of start with church history, which is, funny that people who convert to Orthodoxy, most of us come from a, quote, lowercase Christian situation where we don't learn any church history. And like this idea that that society is its own thing and the church is its own thing. Yeah, they're distinct, but they're not separate. They're distinct, but they're not separate. And so, throughout time, you protect the faith. You protect society from these things. You protect the church from these things. You don't meet all of the heretics where they are without also completely annihilating their position and declaring it false and fighting against it and making sure it doesn't invade and infect the church. I just don't see that that the society itself, you would have to say, well, the society should be an extension of the church. If you're Christian, yeah, of course. Okay, well, at what point do we start behaving like society? You're in a church, kind of. I don't know. Obviously, you don't have the numbers, but still. So I was left with that. I was left with a definitely an empowered position. I was very happy to see how us men in the church all responded, and the fact that they were toast immediately, gone, banished, get out. I just happen to hold a view where doing that at the social societal level is also totally justified. That if you find someone who's publicly nude and indecent or doing something that violates the Christian ethical principles and norms, that honestly, I don't even care if you jail them. I would say banish them. Be off. You can come back and live in this ordered society. When you clean yourself up, you get the benefits of an ordered society from people who believe in order, who can ground their order in something higher than humans. And you can enjoy those things as long as you live according to the decency laws. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, you're going to jail them? No, just kick them out. What do you mean jail them? Why spend money on jailing them if you can just kick them out? I don't see a problem with this. It's just like grounding your kid until they figure out, they want to listen. Same thing. Why not? I don't understand. Well, because it violates liberty, Jimbob. That's not what the founding daddies wanted. I don't care about the founding fathers. So anyway, when you go back into church history, you learn that things are ordered. Liturgy itself is ordered. It's actually the order of liturgy, the fact that it's ordered and facilitated with purpose and intentionality. Everything you see and touch and smell is a part of the divine liturgy. It got me thinking about society being ordered and liturgy being ordered and the church being ordered, and everything that's ordered is what we argue for, proper ordering. That's actually kind of just what justice is, divine order. And not that we humans can make that happen from the top down. We just try. We just try to make We try to order ourselves and others and society. We try. But the problem in the West especially is that we try until we violate the Enlightenment principles. And it's just been such... I know I spent a lot of time on this, but it's been so daunting to look at it. How much of a hill we have to climb over of other conservatives who are ultimately liberals in the end.